All right. Bob, you ready?
Ready to go.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for joining on a Friday night. I know 7 days from now, hopefully most or all of us will be on the football field at 7 o'clock, kicking off, hopefully before 7:02, that we all get kicked off right at 7 o'clock and get going. If you do have a question, please feel free to type it into the chat box, and we will respond to those as we go along. I know that Bob Foss will be taking those questions and responding to them. But today, we're going to review all of the officials' considerations for COVID-19 football guidelines. Bob, you can see the screen, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So generally speaking, what we're going to be working with this year is the MHSA has come through with a series of guidelines. There are mandated guidelines, there are suggested guidelines, and there are permitted guidelines. Naturally, all of the mandated guidelines are things that we must abide by. The suggested guidelines are things that we should do, and the permitted guidelines are things that we may do if we decide to do it as a crew. So, for example, in the permitted guidelines, there is a section on ball mechanics. If the crew decides to not handle the football, the entire crew needs to not handle the football. Not just one official says, I'm not going to handle it, or another official says, I'm not going to handle it. If one person says they do not feel comfortable handling the football, the entire crew needs to abide by that mechanics deviation. Another thing that's important for us is that we are only expected to officiate between the lines. So we're not responsible for monitoring activities on the sidelines. We're not responsible for ensuring physical distancing, and we're not responsible for diagnosing symptoms of illness or symptoms of concussion, that sort of thing. Another point that was made clear in Brent Rice's email from today, as well as yesterday, and the Executive Order 180 and the clarifications to Executive Order 176 are that face coverings need not be worn by game officials during active gameplay. However, in any other situation, be that arriving on site at in the parking lot, walking to the field, conversing with the coaches prior to the game, walking off the field, all of those things that are not active gameplay, we are expected as officials to exhibit the proper behavior and wear the face covering. During the game, if you feel comfortable, you may do so, but you are not required to wear a face covering. And that may be a face mask that's worn directly over your nose and mouth, or a face shield, which is possibly clipped onto your cap or worn around your forehead and is clear in nature. And we'll get to that for the players as well, what we expect of the players and what we expect of the coaches as well in regards to face coverings. But just understand that it's not our responsibility to enforce any rules, regulations, or executive order. Simply, we need to abide by that when we are not directly officiating the game. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make one additional point on the face coverings. These are the MHSA's minimum guidelines with regard to face coverings. We may get to a site You could be at Lake Orion, you could be at Wall Lake Western or Seaholm or any other school for that matter. And that school might require us to wear masks during the game. It's a potential. We'll find out when we get there.
Right.
Make sure that we're communicating with the athletic directors early in the week. So
just about to get to that point.
I'll shut up.
Very important. Before 7 o'clock, I was just relaying the fact that I was communicating with an athletic director who informed me that next Wednesday's JV game is not being played on Wednesday. It's being played on Thursday. And the freshman game is being played at a completely different location. That team is on the road. So if we communicate well in advance of arrival at a game site, we will be able to confirm where we are supposed to park, whether or not there will be a locker room, because one of the things that the athletic directors are not required to do is provide us with a locker room. That's in the COVID guidelines. They do not need to provide us with a locker room. They also do not need to provide us with anything to drink or eat on site. That's another item that I noticed from the guidelines, was that all they need to do is provide us with a secure parking location and make sure that a school host is available to meet the crew at arrival and provide for a safe departure and answer any questions that we may have. So from a minimum perspective, the athletic director may only have the minimum amount of details for us. They may be only going to the minimum level because they may not have concessions at their school, and certainly they're only going to have 2 people per participant in the stands. So the crowds will not be as large as they have been in the past. But if we communicate early in the week, that will allow us to explain our expectations and for the athletic directors to explain their expectations when we arrive on game site to officiate. Since the season was announced back on, I want to say it was September 3rd, but just before Labor Day, there have been a significant amount of changes to the game schedule. So make sure that you are confirming with each athletic director. Your varsity game may be at a different time or on a different day, let alone the sub-varsity games that are being played. And just for our purposes, for our safety, if a game official does test positive for COVID-19, it is expected, number one, that the official will quarantine for at least 14 days or until medically cleared to officiate. And number two, that the official will communicate with the rest of the crew or the athletic director, preferably both, to let them know that they do have a medical reason not to officiate. Don't have to necessarily say because of COVID, but certainly I cannot officiate because of a medical reason, and I need to be replaced on this particular assignment. All right. So just jumping right into the permitted mechanics deviations, and these are precautions and safety measures which we are allowed to take during high school contests or any football contest this season, and keeping in mind that this is not the entire list of things that we could do to protect against the spread of any infectious diseases. So number one, we may use electronic whistles. And Bob, I don't know if you have an electronic whistle with you right now.
I do.
Do you want to blow the whistle?
Sure.
All right. Okay. So it works just like any other whistle. It's probably a little bit more shrill and has different lengths that you can hold that whistle, but that's made to wrap around your wrist, I believe, and you press a button for the whistle to function. We may wear gloves, whether latex gloves or work gloves or sports gloves or gloves that are specifically made for officiating. I don't know what that might be, but in any case, any latex gloves or work gloves or sports gloves are permitted to be worn by officials. As I said a little bit earlier, in lieu of face masks, we may wear plastic face shields if we choose to do so, and those may be either fastened directly to the hat, or they may be placed on your forehead underneath the hat. I don't know how that might work, but in any case, you may wear plastic face shields. During the game, any and all of us, sorry about the dog, any and all of us may carry a spray disinfectant. It says in the guidelines that the umpire may use it on the football. My personal recommendation would be to only use hand sanitizer on your hands and do not spray it on the football. If the team provides you with something to spray onto the football, that's between each crew and that particular team. But I would say that hand sanitizer is meant to be used on your hands, not on the football, even though it does say that you may carry a spray disinfectant. From a mechanics perspective, in terms of positioning, the umpire may take a position that's deeper or wider than normal. So generally speaking, we want to be 7 or 8 yards deep on a varsity football field. We may take a position that's 10 yards deep, but we don't want to take a position that's so deep that we are in the back judge's lap, so to speak. So we don't want to be 15 yards deep, because then we're not really officiating from an umpire position. We're not really officiating our area of focus. And also, sideline officials, whether that be the line of scrimmage officials or the deep wing officials in crews that have 7, may take their starting positions 1 yard onto the field of play. And that is to give them additional space so that they are not in any sort of physical distance from the coaches or players on the sideline. It's very important this year that we keep the coaches off of the field, number one, and number two, keep them out of the white, the 2-yard belt during play. As we know that there may be 3 coaches in the white area calling plays in between, but we need to keep that white area clear from coaches as much as possible. That will allow us to have that physical distance of more than 6 feet. And if we decide to start 1 yard onto the field of play, that is permitted this year as a starting position. The last permitted mechanic deviation is that each crew may decide or has the option to not touch the football in relation to spotting the ball. So if you are using the permitted mechanic where you do not touch the football, all crew members must use the same mechanic. There will be no 1 or 2 officials not touching the ball and 3 officials touching it, or vice versa. If one decides not to touch the ball, all officials on that particular crew should not touch the football in terms of spotting. And if you do that, the referee must inform the coaches whether that mechanics deviation will be used, and you must inform them prior to the game so that they have an idea as to how their snapper, how their kicker, any other player will address or handle the fact that we are not touching the football. So specifically in relation to ball mechanics, there are some key items. Number one, the offensive team will be responsible to bring their ball out for their series. So the offensive team will bring it out with them, take it into their huddle, and the snapper will hold the ball. Or if they wish, they can put the ball on the ground as they normally would. However, it's going to be the offensive team to take the ball out with them. If we use the ball mechanic where we're not touching the ball, the offensive team will need to go retrieve incomplete passes. They will need to retrieve footballs that go out of bounds after a fumble or any play. They will need to retrieve the ball after all kicks, including those that are, punts or field goals that are scrimmage kicks that are returned. So they will need to go get their ball and take it back to their own sideline. And any sort of play where the ball stays in play, like a run up the middle or a pass that is caught, the receiver or the runner will need to return the ball to the snapper in anticipation of the next down. So in terms of what would happen if the snapper is holding the ball, the umpire will mirror their spot from the sideline officials with their foot. And then the umpire would show the snapper where their foot is located and say, this is the spot for the next snap. Officials will only handle the ball during a measurement. That's the only time where if you are using the ball mechanic where you're not going to handle the ball, that is the only time where you're going to handle it. And I would expect that the umpire would also handle the chain if you are performing a measurement, and we would have the same ball mechanics as we usually would in a measurement. Some additional
only one other
items.
thing with regard to measurements, Brian. If the official that's holding the ball on the ground for the measurement, when we bring it back to the middle, that same official will be the one to carry it rather than the referee. So only the official who's holding the ball still on the ground while we're measuring, he's the only official that will handle the ball. So we won't have two officials handling the ball during the same measurement period.
Good point. So that generally would be our back judge, if there is a back judge, or the line judge, a four-person.
I don't remember five-man mechanics.
It's the back judge in five-man mechanics.
All right, well, it's back judge in seven then too.
Yeah. Okay. So some other things to note if we are using the deviation for ball mechanics. The play clock will remain as normal. So we'll get to this on Monday, but remember that we have a 40-second play clock after every offensive play unless there's an administrative stoppage. And if there is an administrative stoppage and the ball cannot be spotted or retrieved and brought back to the huddle in a timely fashion, whether it's for a defensive action or because the ball was thrown 90 yards downfield, we will reset the play clock to 25 seconds and we will chop the play clock back in. However, if the offense is delayed due to their own inaction or incorrect action, we will keep that play clock moving as we normally would, whether that be 40 seconds or 25 seconds, and we would penalize the offense for delay of game if the play clock expires. So if the offense brings out a football and then realizes that it's the wrong football and they have to go back to their sideline and get another football, they would still be covered under the guise of the original play clock. So we have to keep that play clock moving as we normally would. They do not get extra time just because the officials are not handling the ball. However, keep in mind that if the officiating crew does use the ball mechanics deviation, the offense may rotate the ball on every play, kind of like wet ball mechanics, where they have a ball boy who brings the ball in on every play and gets the old ball and takes that one out. So they may do that on every play if we decide not to handle the ball, just like would happen in a game where there's rain or the ball is wet. So anytime that we're using the deviation where the officials are not handling the ball, the offense may rotate their ball on every single play. In that case, the umpire would mark the spot of the snap and would not allow a snap until the crew is ready to officiate. And that would occur even in cases where the offense is in a hurry up. So even though, one play ends and they get the ball right back to the snapper and they're ready to go for the next play, until we are ready to officiate, the umpire is directed to hold up the offense and make sure that they do not snap prior to our being ready. So that's a very important note. But that's everything that I have on ball mechanics. Does anyone have any questions on that?
This is Steve Witkowski. I just have one quick question. What are the majority of the crews doing? Are they handling the ball, not handling the ball? What have you heard with the coaches? Are they going to give us a hard time if we don't handle the ball?
So again, this is unprecedented, and we don't know who's going to handle the ball or not until the games start. So there hasn't been any scrimmage or any test of this, at least as far as I'm aware. So it's really up to each crew. And then in terms of the coaches, they're really just going to have to deal with us being officials and wanting to protect ourselves if we decide to do that. In regards to the coaches, I wouldn't really worry too much about their, concern related to that. I would simply say, this is what we're doing, and this is how your team needs to react to that. You can rotate the ball on every play. Your snapper needs to make sure that the snapper has the ball after every play. Your receivers need to hustle downfield and get the incomplete passes after every play. And if you don't have that, then you have to have a ball boy who's retrieving the ball after every play. So it's really just, we need to tell them that we're doing the mechanics deviation, and then they need to adjust. But they've been made aware of this as well, because they've seen the same exact notifications from Brent Rice and Mark Ewell and Nate Hampton related to this, because they have the same access to data as we do.
Is there a recommendation that you would have whether to use it or not?
Personally, I think it's related to the age and susceptibility of each member on your crew. So if I have one crew member who is concerned, then we're all going to do it. So I would say that this is probably going to end up being more prevalent than not, personally. And that's just going to be based on the health and well-being of each member of every crew. I can't really say whether or not this will be big or small or up or down, because we just don't have any data on this new mechanic up to now.
Well, where's Dr. Fauci on this thing? Let's get some data.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have some data after the first week, I'm sure. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Nice job, Brian.
Yep. Thank you. So that was the permitted things that we may do. Here are the suggested mechanics, and these are our best practices that we should all be doing, especially considering that, like I said earlier, there's probably going to be no locker room and no concession stand and no place for us to go in between quarters, in between, at the half. We may just be off in, our own little area, but not necessarily inside the concession stand as we usually have been in the past at certain schools. So one of the big things that we need to do is we need to be honest about any symptoms that we do have, meaning on game days, we need to check our temperature in the morning, in the afternoon, whatever the case may be. At some point during the day, please check your temperature. Please check if you have any symptoms. They specifically in the MHSA guidelines wrote fever, cough, shortness of breath, or with a temperature of 100.3 Fahrenheit or higher. If you have any of those symptoms on game day, you should stay home. And you should let your crew know, I have one of these symptoms. I don't know what this is related to, but I don't feel that I should officiate because I don't want to unjustly or, I don't want to risk anything, because for $60 or $65 or for JV for 40 or 45 or 50, it's really not worth it for us to risk our health for this. So if you do have a symptom, please stay home. When you are on site, it's a good idea to bring your own water, because they may not have water or other beverages at the game site, for us at least. We should, prior to the game, when we are on site, wash our hands or sanitize our hands frequently. That should go both before and once we're on site. And then especially, we should probably either wash our hands or use hand sanitizer after inspecting the footballs, inspecting any casts or braces, and checking the down markers prior to the contest. So I would recommend at least someone on the crew takes with them a small bottle of hand sanitizer, or you identify where a bathroom is where you can wash your hands after doing all of the pregame preliminary activities, but prior to the start of the contest. It goes without saying, but we should not be sharing uniforms or towels, for sweat or the like, or any sort of equipment that we would wear on our bodies. So those are things that we should not be sharing. Each official should retrieve their own beanbag and penalty flag. Well, that kind of goes without saying. If you throw the flag, you better go and get it after you've made your call, good, bad, or ugly. So those are the suggested mechanics deviations. They're all, I hope, somewhat common sense, but certainly you should be doing each of those things. And then here are the mandated mechanics deviations. And these are the things that we are required to do, we must do, and if someone doesn't do these things, it says in the guidelines that we are not able to officiate. Now, I wouldn't go that far that we're not able to officiate, but certainly we are required to do these things, and we really need to focus on these items. it says, to the extent practical, we should arrive at the game site at the same time. We should enter game site as a single group while also maintaining physical distancing. So that means that if someone arrives 30 minutes before another official, we should all wait in the parking lot and then enter the facility together. Any pregame meetings that we have, we should conduct those while practicing proper physical distancing. We definitely will not be engaging in handshakes or fist bumps with players, coaches, or administrators. In terms of how we introduce ourselves to the coach, possibly a tip of the cap might do, but certainly we want to maintain distance in all of our conversations with the coaches and with the players and with the administrators. For the coin toss at the beginning of the game and at the beginning of overtime, the only four people, there will be four of us, who will be at the coin toss will be the referee, the umpire, and one team captain for each team. So the four individuals will conduct the coin toss from 6 feet apart, and then each team will take their result back to their team, and we will start the game or start overtime thereafter. And the referee and umpire will communicate to the rest of the crew after the coin toss has occurred as to what happened. Hopefully the referee is using proper signals and has signaled correctly up to the press box, but even so, we should communicate after the coin toss to the rest of the crew. It's very important that we do not physically contact players during the contest, including to break up a pile. And so what this means is, number one, we're not going to get in the way of two players that are jawing at each other and could potentially fight, okay? We're going to use our voice and more than likely our whistles, whether they be electronic or traditional. It also means that if there's a pile on the ground, say after a fumble, and 14 or 15 players have all dived on top of the pile to jump in there and try to get the ball, we're going to use our voice and we're going to use our whistles to get them to break up, okay? We're not going to dive in and try to contact players and dig in there and see who has the ball. We're simply going to use our whistles and our voice to break up any and all piles. And if they don't respond, we're going to continue to ask them to break up. At a certain point, obviously, we could penalize players for delay of game, but we're going to continue to tell them to break up because we can't use our traditional methods to break up piles or to keep players from fighting. We just can't touch players this year at all. In terms of coaches and in terms of the officials ourselves, we need to be maintaining physical distancing. So unless we have a call that someone has made that needs to be explained either within the crew or to a head coach, we need to maintain distance of at least 6 feet, hopefully more than 6 feet. So anytime that we do need to talk to the head coach to explain a ruling, we're going to actually bring that head coach onto the field between the sidelines and the 9-yard marks, which the 9-yard mark is usually the number. We're going to bring just that head coach and just the referee and one other official to listen to the comments and kind of arbitrate between the two if necessary. Just those three individuals will have that conversation to explain a ruling that was made on the field. So any other time that we're dealing with the head coach, we need to make sure that the head coach is practicing physical distancing or has, their mask on, and we have our mask on to discuss any sort of play situation. We're not going to converse with coaches if they are not either A, practicing physical distancing, or B, have the necessary protections, and that includes a face mask or face shield. And we should also, if we've stopped and have turned to answer a question from a coach, we should also put our face mask on or face shield before answering those questions. And then just a point, we should only send one official to meet the game timer before the game and explain any timing rules that we may have, or answer any questions that they may have. So those are required mechanics deviations. Does anyone have any questions about any of the permitted, suggested, or mandated mechanics deviations?
Question, Brian.
Yep, go ahead.
If our voice doesn't work for umpiring a fumble situation, should we be just pointing the direction to get this thing going?
They only have 40 seconds to get the next play off.
If we have to rule on a fumble situation.
Oh, I understand, but if the offense has the ball, we've got to tell we probably need to tell the coaches before the game, we are not going to touch players. So if there's a fumble and there's a pile, your players need to unpile themselves. Otherwise, the offense may be charged with a delay of game. We're not going to go in there and touch players, period. So we're going to probably hit the whistle quite a bit. We're going to use our voice around the pile. And if it requires multiple officials to use their voice and blow the whistle, then that's what we need to do. But again, the teams only have 40 seconds to get the next playoff. And I would strongly encourage all of us to say, Coach, we're not going to touch the players, which means that you need to be ready to go for the next play if there's an issue. And we're going to maintain physical distancing when the coach and official, or official and player are talking in any case. So those are two things certainly that we need to cover with the coaches, regardless of any of the other mechanics deviations.
Got 2 points that I'd like to add to that train that you were taking there, Brian. And, with this being clearly unprecedented time, something that we've never dealt with before and hopefully never will have to again, make sure that we are understanding that the players and coaches have never dealt with us not touching footballs before. They haven't dealt with us not touching players when it comes to unpiling players for a fumble. If they're not listening to you, don't get upset. If they're not moving quick enough, don't get upset. Although the play clock is going to continue to run, if there is a normal delay because this is an unusual time, don't be afraid to reset the play clock to 25 and don't look for reasons to penalize somebody for moving too slow is where I'm going with that. So those 2 points. Don't get upset when things don't go smoothly, and don't look for reasons to have a delay of game flag.
Good points. Definitely good point. In terms of rules modifications, I've got 3 pages here of rules modifications, 3 on the first and then 2 each on the next 2 pages. One of the big things is obviously maintain physical distancing, which means that means that the team box may be extended to the 10-yard line for players only. So coaches have to stay on the 25. However, the field team boxes may be extended to the 10-yard lines. And what I understand is that certain fields that are brand new may actually have dots on their sidelines for those individuals, for the players, to be correctly spaced. So the team box may be on the 10. Obviously, if you're at the goal line and there's a player behind you, that's a problem. But they can be all the way down to the 10-yard line. As we talked about a little bit earlier, the ball should be cleaned and sanitized throughout the contest as recommended by the manufacturer. As we discussed, if we're using hand sanitizer during the game, we should use that only on our hands. It says we may spray something on the ball, but let's be sure to just use hand sanitizer on our hands. And then it says here that cloth face coverings are permissible. We know that they're mandated when we're not officiating, but they certainly are permissible during gameplay. And then it also says that plastic face shields shall only be allowed if they are clear without the presence of any tint for the players. So they can wear plastic face shields covering the entire face if they are clear, without any tint, and attached to the helmet. Tooth and mouth protectors. So if everyone's wearing a face mask, it's going to be difficult for us as officials to determine whether or not they're wearing their mouth guard or mouthpiece. So there is no, at the moment, it could be possible that there may not be a requirement for players to wear mouth guards. I don't know that that's necessarily the way that this is going to go, but if they're wearing a face mask and a mouth guard, there is a concern that the players may have difficulty breathing. So it's still to be determined as to whether mouth guards will be required this season. And then for the players, any gloves that they do wear must meet the NOC standard or the SFIA specification per Rule 1-5-2B. So any gloves that they are going to wear, the players must meet the normal rules requirements. Lastly, 2 items about timeouts. Number 1, any charged timeouts, one of those may be extended to a maximum of 2 minutes in length. And the reason for that is because each player should have their own personal water bottle brought to them on the field, or they may go and get their own water bottle and take it back with them onto the field and have that 2-minute timeout with more than one coach in the middle of the field, potentially with the use of technology. So it says here,
Brian,
authorized.
Brian,
Go ahead.
interrupt you. You said in the conference can take place in the middle of the field. The conference is between the 9-yard marks.
Between the 9-yard marks.
Yeah.
Correct. So anything outside, anything inside the numbers, away from the sideline. So we're not sending, if we have a 2-minute timeout, we would not send the teams all the way to their sideline. We would send them to a place that's near the numbers, near the 9-yard marks. And then finally, in between periods and after scores, the time may be extended to a maximum of 2 minutes between the first and second quarter, between the third and fourth quarter, and following any scoring play prior to the free kick. So you'll have to double check with the coaches, or maybe we just say, hey, coach, this is what we're going to do on this particular situation. But just keep in mind that the intermission may be extended to 2 minutes, or times after a score may be extended to 2 minutes. And that, I believe, is everything that I have.
Brian, did you talk about the hurry up mechanic?
Yeah. What would you like to know about the hurry up?
Well, I just asked you if you talked about it, and there's a comment up here about the fact that the umpire still is going to have to hold it and hold the snap and before he legally moves away from it. I didn't hear us talk about that. That's all. So I just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, during the hurry up offense, the umpire will stand over the spot where the ball is going to be snapped and will keep the players from snapping the ball until the crew is ready to officiate. So even in a hurry up offense where the crew is not touching the ball, the umpire is going to make sure that the ball is not snapped ahead of time. Are there any other questions?
Are these slides available on MHSAA website, or can you send them out to the group in an email?
I will send these slides out to the members of the Tri-County, and I think Shane, if you can send those out to the members of the Metro Detroit Athletic Association, that's certainly something we can do.
Shane said, "Will do."
Hey, Brian, just for clarification, on the 3 timeouts, only one can be extended to 2 minutes. One
Correct.
of 3. Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah. So that's how I saw it.
Yeah.
We may consider taking an additional official timeout as we would when it's particularly hot, just to give the kids an extra chance to breathe and catch water. You can do that, make that decision crew to crew. It's certainly something worth considering.
Definitely.
Are there any other questions? Well, I thank everyone for joining, and we'll do this again on Monday. We'll talk about the new rules and any points of emphasis for this year. We'll cover that set of topics on Monday at 7 o'clock. And as we've discussed, the recording will be available online, and we will send out the slides to everyone as soon as possible.
Are you going to send another link for Monday's meeting then?
Yes, we will.
Okay. All right,
Yes.
good.
Yeah, look for that Saturday or Sunday afternoon.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks all.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Good job, Brian.
Brian.
Good job, Brian.
Yeah,
All right.
nice job, Brian.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you. Have a good
Have a
day.
great season.
Yep, good job, Brian.